So today I'm going to be showing you how to set up a reef aquarium. So to start with, you need a tank, pump, lights, rock, and then you can put it in your livestock. So starting with a tank, it kind of doesn't matter what you use. Uh, Glass is most common because it looks the best, but for small tanks, plastic even is fine. Like a literal plastic tub will work as long as it can hold the water safely. I've done that before, and the fish, or not the fish, I didn't have any fish in there. The coral are not really going to care. But as whatever looks nice for you, basically, is what the requirements for a tank is. As long as it doesn't have any copper in it and it's safe for the water weight. Next is pumps, which are pretty essential because you need water flow for oxygen, gas exchange with the surface to oxygenate the water. Because if you don't have oxygen in your water, your fish can't breathe and they die. I guess you could say they drown. They just die. So invertebrates, and so your coral, because everything needs oxygen to live. So you really need pumps, and beyond oxygenation, pumps are important because different corals have different flow requirements. So the amount of flow going over a coral is important. So it depends on the type of coral, but different corals need different levels of flow. And I'll talk about that a bit later. But after that, you need lights, and the main thing with lights is, are they strong enough? They don't have to be really high-end, crazy lights. They just have to be strong enough to support photosynthesis, and they should probably have actinic as well. But actinic is blue light, which makes the coral fluoresce. It's really pretty, but the coral don't actually need it. You can just use daylights, which are normal lights, like the white room lights, I guess. You can use room lights if you want, but these are just buy dedicated reef lights. But beyond that, you need rock, which is actually a lot more important than you might think, because the rock, it on a surface level, it provides mounting points for your coral and hiding places for your fish and all that. But at a deeper level, it's very important because it's where the microorganisms live. And microorganisms are really the most important part of any reef tank because they support the ecosystem at the base level and they support the nutrient cycle. And what that is, so whenever you put in food into a tank, you're putting in proteins, right? And those proteins quickly decay into ammonia, which is extremely toxic for fish and vertebrates. So you need a way to deal with that ammonia. And what you can do is you can use bacteria to convert that ammonia into nitrates. And that's how the ecosystem works, basically. It converts the ammonia from food and organic waste into nitrates, and the nitrates can then be used to grow coral and grow algae and sponges and all the autotrophic kind of life forms. The basic you can think of them like plants. The only one that's actually a plant is algae, but it's nutrient for your coral and all that. So it's extremely important to have a sturdy, robust ecosystem such that your coral can grow well and your fish aren't being poisoned, basically. So that's why the rock is really important, because the bacteria live in there. And there's two kinds of rock you can get. You can get dry rock, which is dead, dry, it has no bacteria in it. Or you can get live rock, which is, it has bacteria already living in it. It already has a pre-established nitrogen ecosystem, nitrifying bacteria in the rock. And I would really recommend getting live rock, especially if you're a beginner, because it just makes it way easier. You don't have to grow your own nitrifying bacteria, which takes months to even a year, and it means your tank's going to look disgusting for about a year. And you can't keep fish for like 1 to 3 months, and it's just a really big hassle, and it's not worth the little money you save from getting dry rock. And it's actually not that much money you save from getting dry rock, as I'll show you in a second, because there are some sites where you can get really cheap, really high quality live rock. I'll show you that right now, actually. So Salty Bottom Reef Company has the cheapest, and they have red recommend their specials. Get specials? Yes. So you get how many ever pounds of rock you want, and this is actually a really good rate. What was their special? Because usually dry rock is like $5 a pound, and live rock is like 8, but this site sells it for like 8 minimum. It's up to 10 at fish stores. This site sells it for like 6, which is really good. They had a special where it was like 25 for 150 or something like that. It was really good. I don't know where it is right now, but you can find it if you look hard enough. I'm not looking very much right now. And alternatively, there's KP Aquatics, which has live rock as well, pretty cheap. And this is like aquaculture. It's from the ocean, which might sound alarming to you at first, but it's actually very good for the ocean ecosystem because it's sustainably harvested. So what they do is they take empty reef beds, empty sand beds, and they fill it up with dead rock, and then they let it sit for like a couple years, up to 10, and organisms just colonize this rock, and it's basically just creating new reefs for these organisms to live on, and cycling out the rock, right? So they take out some, then put new rock in. So it's actually very sustainable and actually good for the environment. It's not. This is very different from rock taken from mature reefs, which is very bad for the environment, and I believe has been banned, luckily. But yeah, beyond the rock, please get live rock if you do set up a tank. Beyond the rock, there is the livestock, which is the coral, and there are basically 2, I guess you'd say, types of coral. There's soft coral and there are hard corals. Soft corals are corals that have no skeleton, and you could think of them kind of like plants, I guess, because you just put them on a rock and give them nutrients and give them light, and they grow. In general, the requirements for soft corals is lower light, relatively low light, which may not mean much to you if you don't know what the baseline is, but it's lower light, lower flow, high nutrients. They mostly grow off the nutrients, less off the photosynthesis, as opposed to hard corals, which in general require. Well, there's 2 types of hard corals actually. There's soft or small polyp stonies, SPS what they're called, and large polyp stonies, LPS. LPS behave a lot more like soft corals. It's this LPS, this branching one. They're really fluffy and big, but they have skeletons underneath them, so they do need the chemicals I'm going to talk about in a second as well. But they like lower flow and lower light and high nutrients, like soft corals. If you're wondering what soft corals look like, this big meadow of grassy green stuff is soft coral. These are soft corals. This really weird thing is called a mushroom. This is called GSP, by the way, green star polyps. This soft coral. These are soft corals. This is soft. That's anemone, I think. These are soft corals. These are soft corals. This is not. These are not. These are not. These are not. Anyways, for SPS, or small polyp stonies, these are the branching corals, and they really look like they are skeletons. It's what you see mainly in the large reefs. SPS are called reef building coral because they grow skeletons very quickly, and the coral is very close to the skeleton. And they're different from LPS and soft corals in that they require high flow and high light. They are like they're the coral at the top of the reef, basically, like near the surface, as opposed to soft coral and LPS, which are near to the bottom in low flow areas where nutrient collects. So back to the chemicals I was talking about. There are two, maybe three major chemicals that you need to worry about. The first one is calcium, and which is calcium chloride, but it dissolves, so it becomes calcium ions. And the second one is alkalinity, which is just another word for carbonate. And these two chemicals work together because are needed together because what the coral does is it collects the calcium ions, it collects the carbonate ions from the water, and it synthesizes it into calcium carbonate within the coral itself to make the skeletons, basically, to make the calcium carbonate skeletons. If you're wondering what calcium carbonate is, it's what makes up limestone. It's what makes up this rock. It's what makes up chalk. It's just it's like rock, basically. And the third chemical is magnesium, which is not actually used by the coral, but it's necessary in that I think it's a new area of research, but I believe the reason it's needed is because it stops the calcium and the carbonate from reacting in the water column, and it makes so only the coral can use the calcium and carbonate to make calcium carbonate. But anyways, that's basically the basics of making a reef tank. If there's one thing you take away from this video, it's use live rock and it'll make your life 10 million times easier. Anyways, thank you